Given what Joel just taught about not having the congregation just shout, preach the word, but rather pray that the Lord would use his servant, I'm going to ask Mark Haynes. Mark, would you stand up and pray, ask God to use my lips for his glory?
Lord, thank you so much that you have ordained for us to be instruments in your kingdom, and we thank you so much for Howard and all the years of his toil here in this congregation, and we only know some of the things that him and his family have been through. We thank you for him and others like him, men and women in this congregation, and we know, Lord, that you need to work in us and through us for good things to come about, so we want to pray this morning. You would bless Howard as he preaches and brings your word. We pray that you give him reliance on you and humility. We pray your spirit would fall upon us, Lord. And you speak to each one of us, and you give us conviction, and encouragement, and instruction, and strength to serve you, Lord. We ask it in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. We do have some visitors among us this morning. And so let me just preface what I'm going to be saying by telling you that we've been going through a transition. Transition has lasted about a year and a half. And I told the elders at that time, a year and a half ago, that I was kind of slowing down. Wasn't that obvious, but I would need to have them think about who might come and take my place here and be the shepherd of this flock. And so I'm thinking a lot about this transition because it's going to be coming to a completion next week. And found a passage that kind of like talks about this whole concept. I'm going to see you're going to see some parallels here, and then you're going to see some differences too. It's the story of Elijah and Elisha, and the story about the passing on of Elijah's mantle to Elisha. Part of the prayer that I had Mark pray this morning, he didn't understand that, was that I would actually say the right words, Elisha and Elijah. I went to see Dave Solt this week, and I told him the story about what I was going to be saying. And at the end of my telling him the story, he said, Howard, you need to get Elisha and Elijah right. So I'm going to try. But if you think that it might fit better, put Elisha in there when I said Elijah, go right ahead. You'll know what I'm talking about as we go along. Passing the mantle. Making a transition. This is a mercy from God. Not every church has this. Not every one of us has the time to be able to adjust to things that are going to happen. Things that are difficult, things that are earth-moving for us. And God has given us that opportunity to make that transition in a kind of a smoother way than could have been if I just dropped dead or something like that. I'm really glad that didn't happen. But anyway, he has been gracious to us. Transition is God's idea here in this particular passage. And you might want to turn to 2 Kings chapter 2. And follow along with me. I am going to be starting out with a couple of verses previous to that, but just go to 2 Kings 2, and I'll meet you there in a few minutes. There was a command given by God to Elijah. Now you'll remember that Elijah was the prophet that called fire down from heaven on Mount Carmel and showed all the people of Israel, especially to the 800 prophets of Baal, that Baal was no God. There was only one God of Israel. And you know that fire came down and burned up the altar as well as the sacrifice and the water that surrounded it. Soon after that, Elijah gets word from Queen Jezebel that she's going to kill him. And he gets afraid and he runs away. And dives into a depression, asking God to take his life. God leads him down to Mount Sinai, gives him food to eat so he could travel 40 days, 40 nights. when he arrives there, God reveals himself to him. He gives him some options in which God was not in, and that would be like the whirlwind and the fire and the earthquake, all of those big, majestic things that you would expect that God would be in, but he wasn't. And then God spoke to him in a still, small voice. And Elijah put his cloak over his face in reverence, and God spoke to him, saying, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He says, "I've been faithful to you. I've been standing up for you. I've been doing your will, and I'm the only one left. There's no one besides me. It's not working. It didn't happen the way I thought it would happen." Well, God speaks to him about that issue. He tells him that there were 7,000 that did not bow the knee to Baal, and he needed to understand there were things going on that he could not see. One of the things he did then was to send Elijah back and gave him things that he should do. Anoint a couple of kings, and then anoint a young man by the name of Elisha, who would become his successor. And so we see in 1 Kings as well these words. "So Elijah went from there and found Elisha, son of Shaphat. He was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen, and he himself was driving the 12th pair. Elijah went up to him and threw his cloak around him. Elisha then left his oxen and ran after Elijah. 'Let me kiss my father and mother goodbye,' he said, 'and then I will come with you.' 'Go back,' he said. 'What have I done to you?' So Elisha left him and went back and took his yoke of oxen and slaughtered them. He burned the plow equipment to cook the meat and gave it to the people. They ate and celebrated his going to be the one who was being taught by Elijah. Set out to follow Elijah and became his attendant." And so we see that this was something that God had initiated. It did the same thing. God did the same thing here with us. As we needed to have a new youth director, and we found that Joel Place was available, we made him an offer that he could not turn down. "Would you please come and take care of our youth? And we're not sure how long that's going to be. We're not sure how much we're going to pay you. And we're not even sure that we will choose you to be the long-term person. Can you just fill in for us?" What a deal! He could not refuse it. And he came and became the director of our youth. God had called him here under unusual circumstances. That was a telling moment for us. A man who would be willing to come in an unconventional way, trusting the Lord's guidance and doing what he felt God was calling him to do. And in that process, God began initiating what we know to be the continuity of teaching of his word here. For as Joel became more and more as a leader in our church, and as he became a pastor and as he became ordained, we began to recognize the work of the Holy Spirit in his life. And began to believe that he was a person that could indeed carry on and lead this church in the way that God wanted us to go. God was providing a voice to speak for him against the things that are happening around us in this world. So Elijah, in pointing the people to God, was a foreshadowing of the ministry of John the Baptist, and so also is the work of the pastor, work of the pulpit. And that is something that needs to have a sanctioning from the Holy Spirit, a recognition by the church body. This indeed is what the Lord wants for us. So we had a time of transition, and that was a time in which I became a discipler. He was a disciple, and we talked often and long about the things going on in the church and about the things that needed to be done and about the things that people were experiencing in their lives and what God was doing here among us. And it's good for us to be able to have some continuity. Somebody taking over leadership who knows the people. And someone taking over the leadership who has been known by the people. And known also by the one who's been discipling him, saying that he is indeed what God has called for our church. So So there was a journey here in chapter 2, verse 1. The Lord was about to take Elijah up into heaven in a whirlwind, and Elijah and Elisha were on their way from Gilgal. And Elijah said to Elisha, "Stay here. The Lord has sent me to Bethel." But Elisha was disobedient. "As surely as the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you." That didn't really seem like he'd learned a whole lot about submission. But actually what it was is a test. Will you stay with me to the very end? I believe Elisha knew that things were going to happen. He knew that God was going to be taking Elijah from him. He understood that there would be a great deal of pain because there had been months, perhaps years, of friendship and love, and he had seen Elijah as a father to him. And to see his father leave would be so hard. Elijah was giving him an out and saying, "You don't have to come." Elisha says, "There's no way in the world you're going to keep me from being with you until the day in which you're taken from me." The company of the prophets at Bethel came out to Elisha and asked, "Do you know that the Lord is going to take your master away from you today?" This is after Elijah had spent time with them, telling them what was going on. And they come out. They know this is going to be hard on Elisha. "Do you know what's going on? Have you heard? Do you understand what's happening here?" "Yes," he says, "I do understand. But don't speak of it." I think this is the kind of humility that had been bred into him by Elijah, that this is not a public event. It is, even though God will be taking Elijah up in a chariot, into the clouds in a whirlwind, into heaven, and boy, wouldn't that be something for everybody to see? Don't speak of it. Don't speak of it. It is God's way of saying, I sanction everything that Elijah has been with respect to me and for promoting the way of God in our country, and he has been faithful to me, and I say that that ministry has been vital to the life of Israel. "Yes, I know," he says, "but don't speak of it." And Elijah said to him, "Stay here, Elisha, the Lord has sent me to Jericho." Once again, he replies, "As surely as the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you." And so he went to Jericho. The company of the prophets of Jericho came out and said, "Do you know the Lord is going to take your master from you today?" "Yes, I know." Don't speak of it. Let's keep it quiet. We know, and we know the significance of it. But it has not become a public thing. Elijah said to him, "Stay here. The Lord has sent me to Jordan." And replied once again, "As surely as the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you." Strong statement, spoken 3 times, is the Hebrew way of saying it is the most important thing. As Elisha tells him again and again, "I have completely adopted everything you have taught me. You are now my father. I will not leave you until God takes you from me." 50 men from the company of prophets went and stood at a distance, facing the place where Elijah and Elisha had stopped at the Jordan. And Elijah took his cloak and rolled it up and struck the water with it. The water divided to the right and to the left, and the 2 of them crossed over on dry ground. Ever seen that before? I've read the story before of that water separating. Joshua was coming into the land. Remember, after Moses was taken to be with the Lord, Joshua leads the people to this river that's raging. And the priests put their feet down in the water and it stops. And they walk through on dry ground. Now we're going in the opposite direction. Elijah and Elisha are leaving the land. And the river opens up. Is the work of God. Only something he could do. So they pass through. This is Elijah transitioning into heaven. It is Elisha transitioning into a promised land and a new ministry. Much like Joel's assuming the pastor in our church. The crossing of the river on dry land points to the fact that it is a work of God and not of man. As Elijah passes out of that ministry, it is a work of God. As Elisha passes into that ministry, it is a work of of God. It is not the person that matters. It is the God who is with him. That is what matters. As Elijah leaves and as Elisha comes, it is God who goes both ways with them. And it is God who will enable Elisha to take up the mantle that he sees coming from Elijah, to cross the river and on dry land. Elijah then asks a question to Elisha. He says to him, "Tell me, what can I do for you before I'm taken from you?" "Let me inherit a double portion of your spirit," Elisha replied. What does that sound like to you? Does that sound like, you know what? You were good, Elijah, but I want to be twice as good. That would be an American way of looking at it. But I don't believe that is the way that Elisha saw this. You'll remember that his relationship to Elijah had become like a father and a son. What we see here is a point of inheritance. Elijah is taken away, Elisha is left behind, and he's asking for the inheritance of the firstborn. Why does he do that? In taking the inheritance, the firstborn son has also with it the responsibility of caring for the family. That is the normal way in the in the Israelite family structure. So also, in this spiritual sense, Elijah is leaving. Elisha will be taking the mantle. He will be taking the responsibility. He is not asking to be better than Elijah. He is asking to be given more than the other prophets. And why so? Because he will have more responsibility. And he's only asking for the resources that are required for him to lead the people to God as Elijah had been. He recognizes that in himself he has not the ability to do this. So it is a humble request. It is saying to Elijah, I am not able to do what I'm going to be required to do. Will you please ask God that he would supply all that I need? And if I'm going to be the firstborn over this nation, then I'm going to need the provisions of the firstborn in order to provide for them in a spiritual manner. You ask a difficult thing, said Elijah. But if you see me when I leave, you will indeed receive the request. It will be yours. Otherwise, not. And so, as they walk along, they are divided from each other by this fiery chariot. And Elijah is taken up in this whirlwind into heaven. And strangely enough, his mantle doesn't go with him. I don't know whether he threw it out of the chariot or what. But it was there on the ground before him. As he left, Elisha saw this and cried out, "My father! My father! The chariots and the horsemen of Israel." Have you ever puzzled over that statement? He is crying out in agony over the loss of his father. And he is crying out on the behalf of the people of Israel over the loss of the one that withstood evil in the land. He represented the chariots and the horsemen of Israel as God's representative. So on a personal level and on a public level, he is crying out over the experience of losing Elijah. Elisha saw no more. He took all of his clothes and he tore them apart. That's grief. That's sorrow. It was not like, oh, good, now I saw it. Now I'm going to get this double portion. No. It was sadness. And I know that in the leaving of this church, there will be sadness. There had been talk about Ian and I coming back after 6 months and giving Joel time to get his feet settled in the ministry. But it appears that the Lord is leading in a different direction, and we will. Putting our house on sale, and we're going to be moving, buying a place with our daughter Laura and Kevin in Harrisburg area. So what we thought was going to be a short period of time and then we'd be back, doesn't appear that that's going to happen. There is sorrow. There is sadness over the saying goodbye. But this is what the transition is for. To make this kind of turnover, this change, to be something able to be endured and something that will succeed in causing this church to continue, and people to continue to know the love of God. As Elisha now picks up this mantle and he takes it and walks over to the Jordan, he slaps the water with the mantle and he says, "Where is the God of Elijah now?" It's not a question that says, "I don't see you." It is a, "Lord, are you with me?" And the river opens, and he walks through it. The point is that the river opens not because he's Elisha. The river did not open because it was Elijah who hit with the mantle before. The river opens because it is the God of Israel who is with them. It is not Howard. It is not Pastor Joel that matters here. What matters is God still here? The answer to that question is resoundingly yes. And our faith is in Him. And we trust that the whole transition process was a work of His will and an act of mercy because He loves this congregation. Well, the prophets, they see the water open and they're, yep, Elisha has Elijah's spirit. He's going to be the one who succeeds him. No question, no doubt about it. But then they come to him and say something like this. "Look, we your servants have 50 able men. Let them go and look for your master." That's really confusing. Didn't they know that God took him to heaven? Apparently they were unsure of that, and perhaps Elijah was on top of a mountain, or he was in a valley somewhere, and we need to bring him back. Because you know what? We're much more comfortable. We're allowing you to be the leader, Elisha, but we need Elijah there too, because what you can't figure out, I'm sure he can. We need you. And they made it really hard on Elisha until he finally said, "All right, go ahead." But he had originally told him, "No, don't do this. Don't do this." And they came back after 3 days and found out, you know what? He couldn't do it. He wasn't there. He said, "Didn't I tell you that?" The point is that there will be temptations for some of you, not many of you perhaps, but there may be some of you who will feel like, yeah, Joel's the right person for the job. But somehow or another, Pastor Howard has been my pastor for 30 years. I'm used to him, trust him, and when I have a problem, I'm going to call him. And I think it's the sort of same thing going on. Not realizing that it isn't Pastor Howard that matters. It's not Pastor Joel that matters. It is, what is God doing? And if God has done this transition, God is able to give what is necessary to the pastor, the new pastor, Pastor Joel. So I'm welcoming your phone calls. I'd love to talk to you. I really am going to enjoy those times when we do talk. But if you call and you're calling because you want a pastor, please understand that one of the first questions I'll ask is, have you talked to Pastor Joel? Because he's your man. He's your servant. He's the one that God has brought to our church. These are necessary things. To trust him. And let him be in charge of what's going to happen. Let's pray together. Father in heaven, we give you thanks. For your grace and for your mercy, we praise you. We thank you that you, in a time when it was required, began this process. And in my own life, Father, I know as I see the things transpiring around me and in me, I know that what you started a year and a half ago was exactly what needed to be done. And I praise you that you think about us and that you love us and you have planned for us. Thank you, Father, in Jesus' name.